Friends, it's Friday. It's time for your question of the week. This week's question: who is your neighbor? Who is your neighbor? Now that might sound like a strange question, but I'm referring here to Luke chapter 10. And in Luke chapter 10, we see that Jesus gets in a discussion with a scholar of the law. The scholar of the law asks him, which commandment is the greatest? And so Jesus really ultimately tells him that love God and love your neighbor. And so this scholar asks him, well, who is my neighbor? And so Jesus goes on to then give the parable of the Good Samaritan. And you've heard the parable before, but in that parable, there's a man who's attacked by robbers, stripped of everything, left for dead after he's been beaten. And he's passed by a Levite and by a priest. But then there's a Samaritan who comes. And being a Samaritan is a very significant detail to this story, because Samaritans and Jews did not get along. And Jesus, of course, was a Jew, and he was telling this story about a Samaritan. And a Samaritan who came and took care of that man. He went above and beyond to take care of this man who was beaten and left for dead. And he says that this was the man. This Samaritan was a neighbor to the other man. He saw the other man as his neighbor. Even though this was a non-Samaritan, probably a Jew who was beaten, and someone who would have been in conflict with the Samaritan, he still saw his duty is to take care of this man and to love this person. And so I ask you, who is your neighbor? Inviting you to consider people in your life who you have a difficult time with, who perhaps have not been kind to you, or people who you struggle to get along with, and to think about those people and think of how you can be a good neighbor to that person or to those people, how you can love others that are most difficult to love. And so I invite you to consider that question: who is your neighbor? And from there to look at how you can be a good neighbor to that person. God bless you all, and please know of my continued prayers.